5 murders, 4 overturned convictions, and 3 men sitting in prison today who were wrongfully convicted. Join me as I share their stories and show you how they're all intertwined by the actions of corrupt officials. We'll examine their resume of deceit and hope to bring justice to their victims. I'm Heather Trentacosta, and this is Without Conviction. Hi, and thank you for joining me on Without Conviction. I'm Heather Trentacosta, and I'll be your host. Today I want to discuss some wrongful convictions, and these wrongful convictions are part of someone's resume. These convictions helped officials get grants. They helped in their status in their office. It just showed convictions. So how they obtained these convictions didn't matter. It didn't. There was no questioning how they got these convictions. They just got the convictions, and whatever they were campaigning for at the time, they used these convictions on their resume to gain political advances and monetary advances. They also used other officials within their community to help obtain unlawful confessions or jailhouse informant testimony. I'm going to read from the 2019 exoneration report, and this will tell you a little bit about what is behind most wrongful convictions. Official misconduct and perjury or false accusation continue to be the main reasons innocent men and women are wrongfully convicted in America. According to the 2019 annual report by the National Registry of Exonerations, that misconduct, the report indicates, is the most prevalent in cases involving the most serious criminal charges. So, official misconduct, what is that? That's when police officers, prosecutors, judges continue to prosecute, bring charges, prosecute, and continue to try people when they're deliberately withholding information that can exonerate these innocent people. They can suppress or withhold evidence or even manufacture evidence against these people they're just working to get a conviction. Now, there's also the testimony from witnesses, and there are many occasions where there are jailhouse informants. That's a huge problem with overzealous prosecutors that are just looking to get their numbers up, their conviction rate, just so that they look like they're doing their job well. And in the cases that I'm going to talk about today, jailhouse informants were used in each and every one of these cases, and They were the main source to get these convictions against these men. The first case that I want to talk about, it's actually two cases in one. It's the murder case where two brothers were charged and convicted. Sammy and Willie Jean Thomas in 1979. Now, they were both convicted of murder and, lesser charge of burglary. The officials in this case had a paid informant. They got information from this informant for him to give a statement against these two men. The two men that I'm talking about, Sammy and Willie Jean Thomas, are black men. They were in their 20s. The eyewitness to the actual crime, who was the brother of the victim, gave a description of two white men running from the scene. So his statement was withheld. His statement was suppressed. His statement was disregarded in this whole case when he was the first person to give a statement, to give any type of hint as to who committed this crime. It was his own brother who was killed. So they pursued these two young men anyway, ultimately convicting them of murder. And they served a few years in prison. And it's not an easy task by any means to even have the wherewithal to start to fight something like this. You're convicted. What do? You're convicted. You're innocent. You're sitting in prison. Do you think that you have resources there? Especially back then, there was no internet access or anything. How the heck did these guys do it? And, on top of that, they're fighting this. How many more people must there be that are victims of these officials? Well, I'll tell you. They continued to fight. They ended up getting their convictions overturned. They're exonerated. They're in the National Registry of Exonerations. So, if you want to look them up, I have information and I'll put that up on the screen as well. But it's Sammy and Willie Jean Thomas. And that's going back to the late 70s. Then moving forward, we have the Thomas Bianco case. Now, Thomas Bianco, he was charged and convicted of a murder in a small town. Now, the young girl who was the victim in this case, she grabbed my attention when I looked at her picture. Her name's Julie Monson. I have a daughter that age, 18 years old. As a mother, I cannot even imagine the pain, the anguish, not knowing what happened to your child. I can't imagine the pain of her family. So, when they did charge someone with her murder, there must have been maybe some sense of justice. Okay, my child is gone, but they found the person, they got the guy, and he's going to be punished. Because, we trust in the law, we trust our judicial system, we want what's right. Now, going forward, this young man, Thomas Bianco, his case was overturned. And he was later exonerated. And later on, they learned that exculpatory evidence had been withheld. So the prosecutor in this case withheld evidence. It was official misconduct for sure in this case. There was also false testimony again. It's a very common thing for paid informants or jailhouse informants to be exploited to gain a conviction. It doesn't matter if they've got the right guy, they just have somebody. And I don't even know if they care that it's accountability, because you've got the wrong person. You have the wrong person. Or at least you don't have the right person that you're charging and prosecuting. So this young girl, this beautiful young girl, she's gone. She's gone. There's no life, no future for her. And her family, is going to suffer for the rest of their lives. And to this day, there is no consequence. There's no accountability. Who did this to this young girl? The person's still out there. Who knows? We can be face to face with this person. They're just out there living their life. And this young girl is just gone, stolen from her family. I think that's one of the things we tend to forget when we focus on wrongful convictions and, the secondary victims in all of these cases, which is, the men and women who are falsely accused and prosecuted and have to endure years behind bars. They lose their freedom. They lose their sense of self, their sense of safety. That's stripped away from them. But, we tend to forget that there are those initial victims that are also without any justice. They're almost forgotten, and how do you make good on that? How do you go back and say, oh, we're gonna get the right person this time? We lose faith. I'm gonna move on to the next case. That is the Roy Brown case. Now, Roy Brown was accused of killing a social worker, Sabina Kulikowski. Now, they targeted Roy Brown because he had a rap sheet, and he was kind of a bad boy, so he was an easy target to prosecute, because they can build a case around him and make it believable for a jury, and they can get him indicted, get him tried and convicted, which they did. They got this poor guy, they got him convicted on bite mark evidence, which was, if they would have gone with the professional opinion that they received initially, which said that there was no way that the bite marks in this case could match Roy Brown's teeth. There was no way. Because he didn't have the teeth there to make the impression. Instead of presenting that evidence to the defense, which would be exculpatory evidence, again, they decided, you know what? I'm not going to bring this forward. Let's call the local dentist down the street. You know, somebody they have in their back pocket in their little community. So they got the local dentist. And of course, yes, the bite mark matches. Yeah, according to him, right? But they dismissed the first statement that they received. They also used paid jailhouse informants in his case to testify against him. He spent years in prison, and he was fighting his case from prison, knowing that he did not commit this crime. It was a heinous crime. It was such a brutal, brutal murder. He did his due diligence there in prison. He obtained, finally, he obtained these records, these statements from the prosecution that had been withheld from the defense, and he used them in his appeal. And ultimately, with the help of the Innocence Project and Peter Neufeld, who represented him, he was also represented by Katie Karlovitz, and they did a fine job, and they got him his overturned conviction. So that was taken care of. He was later exonerated of that crime. But you know, he spent years in prison, like I said, and he was sick in prison. He was sick. He didn't receive the medical care that he would have had he been a free person. So that shaved years off of his life, and sadly he died just a few years later. But if you want to learn more about his case, there are several true crime shows that have covered his specific case, and I'll provide some links to those as well. So now we have all of those wrongfully convicted, overturned, and exonerated men. That's 4 lives that have been greatly impacted in a negative way by injustice and abuse of power. What I want to share with you is how they're all connected. And the reason I even know about these cases to begin with. I started doing some research because my brother Sean Ryan is in prison. Now, Sean has been in prison since 1978. He was serving time for a crime. He was then charged while he was in prison with the murder of another inmate. My brother has insisted for all these years that he is innocent, that he did not commit this crime, and he can prove it. I did not learn about any of the evidence that he had until about 9 months ago, in late spring of 2020. Once I learned about the evidence in his case, which was undeniable, in my opinion, I said, I have to do something about this. And in doing so, I learned about all the other cases that I just spoke about. Now, what ties these cases together is that they're all in the same town in New York. They're all from Cayuga County, New York, and they involve the same officials as in my brother's case. So the same judge and or the same DA that prosecuted my brother and convicted him. In my brother's case also, there was a great deal of misconduct. There was witness tampering. There is a recantation of one of their jailhouse informants. And by the way, that's all they had to go on to convict my brother. There was no physical evidence. There was nothing other than these paid jailhouse informants who provided accurate crime scene information. And they, at the very least, contradicted their initial statements when they went to trial and testified on trial. There were several jailhouse informants. Now they picked these men, and we'll have another episode on the anatomy of a jailhouse informant after this one. But they chose men who had mental illness. They chose men who had serious substance abuse problems. You know, they chose the most vulnerable to manipulate and exploit in these cases. And they got ultimately what they paid them for. They got the false testimony. There was exculpatory evidence. There was, so even though they were these paid informants, you know, when you're lying, you're not going to get it right every time. You might get some verbiage exact, you know, which is something that did occur from informant to informant. They would use the exact same wording, which struck me as odd, and I don't know how any prosecutor or a defense attorney could look at that and say, you know, they're word for word, their statements are exactly the same, even though they, you know, they weren't together. It's like they were fed the information, which they were, because we later saw an affidavit from one of the informants, Albert Bell. He recanted and he gave his affidavit telling us exactly what did go down. And it was, the whole thing was a sham from the beginning. They took 8 Polaroid pictures of my brother the day of the incident. And that was their photo array. That's what they showed these other inmates. They showed him the pictures. They showed them the pictures of my brother, asking them if they want to go home. So they promised these men transfers, early release, recommendations for early parole, which was actually followed through. They followed through with the promise, at least on the end of the prosecutor involved in this one, and that is Paul Carbonaro. He was the prosecutor, the DA at the time. And he was also the prosecutor in the Roy Brown case. He was also the prosecutor in the Thomas Bianco case. And I'll just share with you the judge that was involved in this was Peter E. Corning. Now, Peter Corning became a judge only after his wrongful convictions, his prosecutorial misconduct in the first two cases that I told you about, the Thomas brothers. Yes, he was the prosecutor in that case, in those two cases. So not only did he get away with misconduct back then, he went on to become a judge. There was no repercussion. There was not even a slap on the wrist. Nothing. He became a judge after that. And then he was the judge overseeing these other cases now. We're fighting my brother's case. We're fighting it. We're trying to get him the justice that he deserves. He's had a tough run, you know. He's been in solitary confinement for the past 26 years. It's just in a civilized, we're supposed to be a progressive country. This man has been in a cell for, 23 hours a day, 7 days a week for 26 years. And he still has some fight left in him. And I'm happy to be on his side, fighting with him for justice, and whatever that means at this point. What is justice for a man who's been wrongfully convicted and didn't even have access to the outside world except for pen and paper? But we'll work toward that, and I will definitely keep you posted on the progress in his case. But I also wanted to bring attention to another case involving two individuals that my brother learned of while he was in prison. And that's Shakim Allah and Damon Hill. Now, their case is very similar to my brother's and to all these other cases that are, strung on this web, this disgusting tangled web of deceit. Their case involves another paid jailhouse informant. And I won't get into too many details on their case because I'm still obtaining files from those gentlemen. I've been in contact with Mr. Allah, and he's been able to provide me with some information. And Mr. Hill has had a bit of a tougher time in prison, and it's taken a toll on him. So I don't know how much information he can provide at this time, but I will work with whatever I get from Mr. Allah. Now, I want to close with this quote. I got this off of the Innocence Project's website, and this is in direct reference to the Roy Brown case. How many more wrongful convictions will it take for New York to begin addressing the systemic problems that lead to such miscarriages of justice? It's particularly troubling that several recent cases from all corners of New York State involve police or prosecutorial misconduct, Neufeld said. That's Peter Neufeld of the Innocence Project. He represented Roy Brown. Brown's case raises key issues that a commission could address, including reliance on unvalidated scientific analysis, the exploitation of jailhouse informants, and prosecutorial misconduct. Now, that's it in a nutshell. That really does describe all of these cases. When you think about, people make mistakes, it can be a fluke, but there is no coincidence here. This is a pattern. It is an obvious and blatant pattern of misconduct and deceit and deceiving the public. Now, what we need to do is fight and speak to our legislators to make sure that all of these records are made public. If there is any disciplinary action taken against these officials, we need to know about it, and we need to know if they are exploiting other inmates in prison, not just the ones who are targeted for prosecution and for getting their convictions, but the ones who are these so-called jailhouse informants. These people are being used. They're being victimized in a sense, and in some cases they are really dangerous people, and they're being let back out as payment to testify against innocent people. And I have one of the jailhouse informants in my brother's case, Robert David, who was released, I think it was 10 days after he gave his testimony, and he went out and he murdered somebody. That blood should be on the hands of the DA in this case. That was the promise made to him behind the scenes, and he was just let out to kill in exchange for false testimony. This man, by the way, is still practicing law. Yeah, he's practicing law. He's no longer a DA, but he is still holding his license, and he's practicing. And hopefully we can change that as well. But thank you so much for listening. You can visit the website withoutconviction.org. You can follow us on Facebook as well. The Facebook page is Without Conviction. And what I'd like from this is just share this information. We need to have a discussion. We need to inform each other and keep learning as we go, to make change, to make progress in the criminal justice system. It is broken, and who's going to fix it? If we don't communicate and share information, then we're going to lose. So I ask you to share this video, share the podcast, and let me know what you think. Let me know if you've been a victim of prosecutorial misconduct. Doing this, I've met so many people who are experiencing similar issues and fighting these battles as well. So hopefully we can work together and bring some relief for these men and women. I'm Heather Trentacosta, and this is Without Conviction.